Hi, in this video we'll talk about how to apply and not apply disjunctive syllogism. Hi, this is Logic Self-Taught with Dr. Phi. In this video we'll introduce a new rule, disjunctive syllogism. We will talk about how to apply and how not to apply the rule, what mistakes to watch out for. Disjunctive syllogism essentially allows us to use information contained in a disjunction. You must be given two propositions. One, a disjunction that stands on its own line, and another, the negation of one of the disjuncts. It also must stand on its own line. If these conditions are satisfied, you are allowed to add a new line to the proof with the other disjunct. Let's look at the rule in symbols. We have a disjunction on its own line. We have the negation of a disjunct, P in this case. If that's the case, we are allowed to infer the other disjunct, R. In this case, we have the negation of the second disjunct, and we are allowed to infer the first disjunct. So it doesn't matter which of the disjuncts is negated, you're always allowed to infer the other disjunct. The rule is intuitive. N will have soup or salad. She didn't have the soup, so she had the salad. Abe will go to Paris or London. He didn't go to London, so he went to Paris, of course. What we need is a disjunction standing on its own line. Here we have a disjunction in line 1. We need the negation of one of the disjuncts. Here we have the negation of the first disjunct. Not B is a negation of the first disjunct B, and so we are allowed to infer the other disjunct by disjunctive syllogism. If we have the negation of the second disjunct, we will be able to apply disjunctive syllogism to obtain the first disjunct. Here's a more complex case. We have a disjunction in line 1, the negation of its first disjunct, not A, and we are allowed to infer the other disjunct. Note that we drop the parentheses, they are no longer needed. What about this case? There is something has dropped on line 2, and so think to yourself what you would need to have in order to derive the first disjunct A by disjunctive syllogism. What must be the proposition in line 2? Think about it a moment. We need the negation of the second disjunct, and if we have it, we can apply disjunctive syllogism. Let's look at another case. Here we have a disjunction whose second disjunct is a negation. If we are given the negation of the first disjunct, not A, then of course what we will be able to derive is the second disjunct, not B. But think again, in this case, if we have the same disjunction, what would we need to have in order to derive the first disjunct by disjunctive syllogism? Again, think a little bit. We would have to have the negation of the second disjunct. We would have to have tilde, tilde, B. Now, don't be tempted to drop double tildes. If you look at the rule, it requires us to have the negation, a tilde, in front of the disjunct. So we must have double tildes in this case. Some students are tempted to derive A, in this case, by disjunctive syllogism. So given the disjunction A or not B, and B, after all, B and not B are negations of one another, they're tempted to derive A. But that's an error. That's a misapplication of disjunctive syllogism, because the rule requires us to have the negation standing on its own line. So the negation of the disjunct must stand on its own line. There must be a proposition which has the form tilde and then whatever the disjunct is. So in this case, we would need tilde, tilde, B. In general, when you apply disjunctive syllogism, be careful about negations. Another common error is our familiar one, having to do with the fact that inference rules don't apply to proposition components. Let's look at some examples. We are given a disjunction and a conditional whose antecedent is the negation of the first disjunct. Clearly, in this case, we cannot apply because the second proposition is not even a negation. Remember, inference rules see only the main connective. The main connective here is not the tilde, it's the horseshoe. We can't apply disjunctive syllogism in this case. How about the following situation? We have now a negation standing on its own line. Can we apply disjunctive syllogism in this way? Well, again, no, because if we look at proposition 1, it's not even a disjunction. What we have in proposition 1 is a conditional. So again, we can't apply disjunctive syllogism at all in this situation. Could we now apply disjunctive syllogism? If you look carefully, what happens here is that disjunctive syllogism is applied to a component. The disjunction must stand on its own line, but we're talking about not just any disjunction, we're talking about the disjunction to which the disjunctive syllogism is being applied. So once again, we can't apply disjunctive syllogism in this way. But of course, we could be given propositions that would allow us to apply disjunctive syllogism. So if we're given not B, the negation of the second disjunct here, we could apply disjunctive syllogism to get the first disjunct. And likewise, if we had the negation of the first disjunct, we could derive the second disjunct by disjunctive syllogism. This is Logic Self-Taught. It's exercise time. Do all the exercises until they feel like a breeze.